US President Donald Trump is promising to announce victory over Isil in Syria. But what should be done with all the foreign fighters who've been captured? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Martine Dennis. Now, the end is nigh for Isil's so-called Caliphate. That's according to US President Donald Trump, who says the armed group will be defeated in Syria within days. US-backed Kurdish fighters of the Syrian Democratic Forces say they've cornered the last Isil remnants in a village near the Iraqi border. Now, the SDF is holding hundreds of foreign fighters and their families. And President Trump has tweeted saying the United States is asking Britain, France, Germany and other European allies to take back over 800 ISIS fighters that we captured in Syria and put them on trial. The Caliphate is ready to fall, he went on. The alternative is not a good one, in that we will be forced to release them. But European countries appear to be reluctant. And one case in particular is dividing opinion in the United Kingdom. We'll introduce our guests in just a moment, but first we have this report from Dorsa Jabari.
Shamima Begum was one of 3 schoolgirls from East London who left the UK to join Isil in Syria almost 4 years ago. She married a Dutch foreign fighter at the age of 15. Now 19 with a newborn child, she's pleading to return to the UK to raise her baby. She was found last week by a reporter from the Times newspaper in a refugee camp in northern Syria.
My baby as well. After my 2 kids died, now I'm really overprotective of this baby. I'm scared that this baby's going to get sick in this camp. That's why I really want to get back to Britain, because I know it will be taken care of.
You said you didn't regret coming to be part of the Caliphate.
No, I don't regret it. But when I came and I saw that there was like underground oppression and all this happening, it came as a shock to me, like this is actually happening.
Her family says it's shocked by her lack of remorse and concerned about her mental health. They have called on the UK government to bring her back urgently. But the Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, says he would not hesitate to block her return. Some experts are skeptical about the ability of the British government to stop her from coming home.
Even though there are reports of her giving up her passport and all of these different issues, she's technically still a British citizen, so if she can find the resources to return, I don't really think that we have all of the legal mechanisms in place to actually block that.
The question of what approach to adopt towards ISIL returnees has divided Britain and other countries. The Justice Secretary says the government will evaluate each case individually. Dorsa Jabari for Inside Story.
All right, let's introduce our guests now. Joining us on Skype from Manchester in the north of England, we have Haras Rafiq, Chief Executive of Quilliam. That's a think tank with a focus on extremism. In London, we have Hanif, CEO of the Active Change Foundation. And in Prague, also by Skype, we have Aymenn Jawad Al-Tamimi. He's a researcher on ISIL. Welcome to you all. And let me start with you, Haras, in Manchester, because, of course, part of your remit really is to deal with this issue of returnees and what to do with them. What are the tools that the British government have at their disposal to either bring back this girl, well, she's a young woman now, or stop her from coming back to the country of her birth?
The fact of the matter is that the British government will probably not take any steps to help her get back into the country. And there have been calls from the Home Secretary recently to say that he would do everything that he could to try and stop her getting here. But the reality is that she's not a dual national. She's a British citizen. She was born here. If she's able to make her way into the UK, Britain cannot strip her of her nationality. We cannot, under international law, make her stateless. So we will have have to let her in. And by the way, I think we should let her in as well, because this is our problem. She is a British citizen. But when she gets here and they let her in, I think two things will happen. The first thing is that they will take her through due process because she has actually, and she's admitted it in the interview, she broke the Terrorism 2006 law where she actually went out to provide materials.
All right. So you're actually outlining a rather clear case then. Coming to Hanif in London. So what do you think should happen to Shamima Begum in the first instance? As we've just heard, she's already admitted to breaking terrorism laws. She should come back and face the consequences. Do you agree?
Well, look, I mean, we've got to firstly look at the environment, the circumstances when she left, and look at her age. She was a minor, a 15-year-old girl. I'm not condoning what she did, or sympathising with her for joining ISIL. But what I am saying is that the considerations have to be made that she was a minor, she was exploited, she was groomed online, like every other individual that's been sexually exploited in this country and beyond. Now, she will, obviously, if she's brought back or if she comes back, yeah, I mean, it's understandable. Everybody knows is that she's going to have to go through due process. She's going to have to go through an assessment, and she's going to, face the consequences. But also, what I think that we should also consider is that when people say that she's not remorseful or she's not regretting what she did, let's not forget she's in an environment where there are other members from ISIS and from other extremist groups that are surrounding her. So she's got to try to preserve herself, because if she says the wrong thing, she's probably going to end up, either killed or in serious harm.
All right.
And the other thing is, she's got a child now. It's been born. So that we also have to take into consideration is that, are we going to be like the extremists and not consider her human right or the right to life, or are we going to take the upper ground here?
Right, OK. Aymenn, talking to you now in Prague. Now, you're an expert in the way these groups actually operate. One of the key considerations will have to be what Shamima Begum actually did when she was in Syria. Typically speaking, what would a 15-year-old girl who got married to an ISIS fighter, what would she have done in terms of the Caliphate?
Normally, I mean, the ideal emphasis for the woman in the Islamic State would be to be the wife at home who raises children or nurtures and raises children and cares for the family. That was the ideal image of a woman's role under the Islamic State, in particular for these women who migrated from abroad to the Islamic State's territory. But it was possible also for women to take on a variety of roles in administration. For example, they could be involved in Hisba, which was Islamic morality enforcement in public. They even had, Islamic State even had special women's teams to do that, based on a prototype they developed in Raqqa. They could work in healthcare. They could work in education under the Islamic State. They could work in dawah. So it was possible for women to have roles inside Islamic State project.
Would it have been possible that she would have been armed, that she would have used weapons, and that she would have been part of atrocities against other people? Would that have been possible?
It could have been in the very, very late stages. There is actually some evidence to suggest the Islamic State took on the idea of involving women in combat, and they even featured it in one of their videos, I think from 2018. But it was, this apparently came very, very late in the day, and it was more of kind of a last resort thing. So that is still possible as well, but I think that will be quite difficult to prove.
All right.
If she was involved in it.
Right. And Haras, we're told that around 900, perhaps 1,000 British citizens have made this trek to join ISIL over the past 7 years or so. We understand that maybe 400 have returned. What's happened to them?
Well, out of the 400 that have returned, we were told by the Securities Minister, Ben Wallace, last year that only 40 of them have been prosecuted. So that's around about 10%. The ones that have been prosecuted if they've been found guilty, they will have gone to prison, and there they will have undertaken some form of rehabilitation. Out of the ones that have not been prosecuted, various things have happened to them. Some have been relocated, some have been housed, some have had their children taken away from them from a safeguarding perspective. But the reality is we let them back in, and we will probably continue to let British citizens back in because they are our citizens and our problem.
And Hanif, the way the British government deals with these returnees, Shamima possibly being one of them, what will that tell us and the rest of the world about how the British government views the situation? As you pointed out earlier, Shamima is a product of British society. And so the British government needs to tread quite carefully, I would imagine.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a few things that we need to consider here. And when we talk about that, you know, when Sajid Javid says that he will try everything in his power, he would not hesitate to prevent her from returning. Now, this doesn't do any help. It actually fuels a narrative that's going to damage us in the coming months and years, because this young lady, I mean, there's a lot of talk up and down the country. I mean, like you said, people are divided here. A lot of people are very hostile in their views, but there are also others that are very sympathetic to this girl's journey as a child, being exploited, you know, and being groomed online, and then gone over, and then having a child, having married at 15 years old. Look, if we are not going to show empathy and sympathy towards this young girl now and take her through the due process, we're only going to fuel a narrative that's going to serve to undermine our efforts in preventing extremism downriver. So it's important that we look at that and consider that. Other individuals that have come back from Syria and other places, you know, have to go through due process, and they will be, you know, going through some mentoring and some de-radicalization programs. Those, however, you know, even though some of them are questionable in themselves, but they are effective if you get it right. And when people say that this young lady could be a threat to, you know, British public, I mean, Sajid Javid tweeted today that, you know, his priority is to protect this country and the people of this country from young women like her. I don't think she poses a threat, because she's not going to come back with a bomb. She's going to come back and go through a due process and then put on to a program where we will assess whether she's a risk to society, and if she is, she'll remain in prison. You know, this is how things work here. So when he says that he's going to protect the country and people, that doesn't make sense, really, because she's not going to be coming here carrying a bomb.
All right. Aymenn, we've talked about what Shamima, as a young woman, perhaps would have done when she was a member of Isil. What are the other aspects to this young woman that need to be measured in order to work out whether it's possible for her to be re-assimilated back into British society?
Well, I think the issue of how she feels about the Islamic State and this issue of remorse, it's definitely relevant to consideration. I don't necessarily agree that she's saying now she has no remorse because of coercion. Actually, on the contrary, she's in Kurdish under detention of Kurdish forces. So the fact she's saying she has no remorse, I think, is or does have regrets is genuine on her part. But I think still that regardless of whether she feels that or not, I do agree with the other participants about the need for a due process and being brought back. And we shouldn't make overall policy judgments based on, say, one particular individual. I mean, I've been to Syria myself and interviewed some of these women of IS, as you can call them, some in an IDP camp that was north of Raqqa, and they say different things. I mean, some of them do say that there was a mistake to come. Others don't feel regret. Others have stories, they say, that they were duped into coming. I mean, whether you choose to believe them or not is your individual choice, but it should all be, I think, subject to due process and then being brought back to their home countries. and then assessing what kind of risk they pose, if any.
Right.
And it will vary by individual.
Haras, coming to you now, this issue of returnees has been portrayed as perhaps one of the most urgent threats to counter-terrorism in the UK, in France, in Belgium, in other European countries. They've all got a certain number to deal with, haven't they? Germany around 274, between France between 400 and 500, for instance. European countries, though, do seem reluctant to have these, to repatriate these former fighters or their families. Is that the case as far as you're concerned?
Look, public opinion does not want, on the whole, these foreign fighters to actually be allowed to come back into their countries. Britain, if you go on social media, if you go on various media outlets, you'll hear the same comments. But the reality is, Britain, France, Germany, etc., we don't deport our criminals to other countries. We don't do that. We actually deal with our murderers, with our burglars, with all the people that commit crimes. We deal with them in our countries. And similarly, these people, we have to deal with them within our countries, and we have to let them back into the country. We don't, however, have to actually repatriate them. We don't actually have to pay money to actually fly them back in. But all of this is just posturing. The reality is, under international law, all of the countries in Europe have a right to children for rehabilitation. In this case, in Shamima Begum, we have a right and a duty from a safeguarding perspective to the newborn child, because she's had a child today, it's been reported. And there's a lot of political posturing going on, but the reality is, when these people do make their way back to France, to Germany, to the UK, to Belgium, and all the other countries, they will be let in. And different countries will deal with this differently. Norway, for example, in some Scandinavian countries, they don't actually prosecute people that come back. I think that's wrong. They actually have them back, and they actually just try to take them through a mentoring and rehabilitation program. I think the majority of European countries will actually take them through the due processes, and where they've broken the law, as we've all said before, they will be prosecuted, and where it's proven, they will be found guilty.
All right. And Hanif, you work for an organisation, the Active Change Foundation. Give us an idea of what that is, what it does, what it seeks to do, and how you deal with the issue of radicalisation within the community.
Well, the Active Change Foundation started off in 2003 to help prevent young men and women from becoming radicalised by extremist groups at a time when people didn't understand what extremism could be. You know, 9/11 was just a one-off, and it was never going to happen in the UK. Unfortunately, through my own personal experience, I realised that it's a huge possibility, and it will happen. And then we had the 7/7 bombings and the subsequent airline plot in 2006. So our work has been set out to go out into the community and engage the wider community, every aspect of the community, those that are moderate and those that are conservative, as well as those that are in school and out of school, to understand and address some of the pertinent issues that young men and women want to talk about. And through that engagement, we get to identify which individual needs the kind of support that's required to prevent them from being radicalized. But also, a lot of the work that we've done is what I've really sort of had passion for is those that have went onto a journey of extremism and violent extremism as well, is to mentor them and to effectively de-radicalize them back into mainstream. And we've had remarkable results over the years. I've worked with, prison probation services, a guy called Simon Cornwall, who doesn't work in probation anymore, he's retired. But through our work and partnership, we've managed to mentor and de-radicalize a number of individuals.
Right. Okay. Aymenn.
Absolutely, not some. We've had a huge amount of success.
All right, a huge amount. Yeah. All right, a huge amount of success. Congratulations, Aymenn. Is it enough? He's talking about a huge amount of success. This is an organisation that started up in 2003. What is the nature of the threat now? Is it as large as it was in 2003, or has it reduced somewhat? What is the situation when it comes to young people, for the most part, being drawn in to these violent extremist groups?
I think the overall appeal is reduced because it's no longer it no longer can lay claim to being this state project that controls vast amounts of country and has broken borders and can offer this alternative vision of life necessarily. On top of that, as the Islamic State collapsed territorially, I mean, there have been more of these internal disputes from within
Right.
various trends.
Aymenn,
my point being.
No,
Sorry?
I wanted to jump in because both of our other guests are shaking their heads. We've got Hanif in London and we've also got Haras in Manchester, both of you disagreeing with what Aymenn had to say, that the allure, if you like, of Islamic State has gone away. If you could quickly give us your thoughts.
Yeah, essentially, one of the things that I've been involved in this now for a long time. I've been involved in the government on the task force after 7/7 and thereafter, and then recently over the last 4 years with Quilliam. In 2005, we were talking about Al-Qaeda-inspired extremism. Then we started talking about Boko Haram-inspired extremism, then Al-Shabaab, and then more recently ISIL. You know, in the next 5 years, if we don't get this right or whatever, there'll be another acronym. Al-Qaeda and ISIL did not inspire extremism. Extremism inspired them. Unless we deal with this problem, unless we deal with the ideological problem, the way that people focus on the intellectual, the ideological, the social, emotional, and spiritual aspects of the radicalization and the de-radicalization, and we provide lots of de-radicalization programs for the government and for other people as well. Unless we deal with this, we're going to have another acronym. We've got to move away from just focusing on the dangerous, on just the dangerous groups. It's the ideology that we need to focus on.
Sorry, before we come to you, Aymenn, your chance to counter that.
Right. No, what I was trying to finish my point being that as Islamic State collapsed as a territorial entity, you saw some of these internal disagreements come out about from within about the overall direction of the group. I was trying to say actually that one of the things going forward you could do to try to counter any potential appeal the group still has is to highlight these internal disagreements about the direction of the group, because some within were saying that the extremists, some even from within the group was saying extremists had taken over, and then some from within the extreme trend said that no, the Islamic State's leadership made too many concessions, suppose moderates or dissenters within the trend. I'm just saying that highlighting those could perhaps be useful in countering potential appeal of the Islamic State after the end of its territorial empire, as it were.
Over to you, Hanif.
Completely disagree, and with due respect, Aymenn, with part of my work is also doing research and interviewing and working with individuals in the Middle East, in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and I've done that in the last, over the last 18 months for a particular institution, and I know very closely that on the surface, what Aymenn is saying is correct, that there are disputes, and if you exploit that, it might undermine them. I disagree with that, because right beneath the surface, there is a networking and a communication between different groups who are now starting to align themselves and form a thread, which they've got a lot of things in common, and to reload themselves as a considerable force that we will have problems in tackling. Now, that won't happen over the next 3, 4, 5 years. That's happening now. And I'm saying this with very caution. That's why I say that whatever we do and whatever we say from the government perspective with regards to this young girl and others can be the undermining of our efforts going forward when things, because groups like these are evolving, they are changing, they are mutating, and they are networking. Right. And that's something that we need to take very seriously.
All right, Haras Rafiq, you were nodding in agreement with that. The way the government deals with these returnees, in particular Shamima, who we're talking about specifically today, will dictate the way forward in so many ways.
Well, the way that the government has been dealing with returnees is not going to change. Again, I keep saying that this is posturing from the Home Secretary, and I think he will try to do everything that he can to try and stop Shamima and others returning, but he won't be able to. That's the point under international law. The most that he can do is issue a temporary excluding order. But we have to move forward a little bit as well. So we have to get past the point where whatever somebody might say or do might cause offence to certain people within the UK, because let's not forget the majority of the UK is not Muslim. 95% of, at least, of the UK population is not Muslim. We also have to look at what they're thinking as well. And what we have to do is we have to get moving forward. We have to learn from the mistakes that we've made in the past. We haven't got to grips with the radicalization. We haven't got to grips with the Islamist narrative. And I say Islamism as opposed to Islam because there is a difference. One's a political ideology, the other is a religion of faith that I and the other two panel members practice as well. What is more important is, have we got robust strategies to actually prevent people from being radicalized in the first place and radicalized moving forward? We have to de-radicalize, yes, we do, but the numbers are getting smaller in terms of the numbers of people that we have to de-radicalize over the last sort of 8 to 10 months. But more than that, we have to build resilience within our communities. And this is a problem for Muslims and non-Muslims. That's what we haven't managed to get right.
Haras Rafiq, thank you very much indeed. Hanif, Qadir, thank you very much indeed. And Aymenn Al-Tamimi in Prague, thank you all very much indeed. Really interesting conversation. And as ever, thank you for watching the programme. You can see it again anytime you like by going to the website aljazeera.com. Should you want more discussion, there's always our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And there's a Twitter sphere. Our handle @AJ Inside Story. I'm @Martine Dennis. From the whole team here in Doha, it's bye for now.